Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the CPA Advisory Show. My name is Chris Hervochon. I'm here along with my co-host, Jeremy Wells. Good morning, Jeremy.
Good morning, Chris.
And we have a very special guest today, Gary Wood of Twitter fame in the house. Gary and I met each other from 2018 Leadership Academy, the AICPA Leadership Academy. And Gary is the one that convinced me to quit my job and go out on my own. And that is a great story unto itself. Gary, good morning. How are you?
Happy to be here. Thankful for what you guys are doing on the podcast, having meaningful conversations in this space. So it's good to come to you from the great state of Missouri, the Show Me State. I don't think anyone really knows why we call it the Show Me State, but it's good to be with you guys. Actually, for the Netflix watchers out there, coming to you specifically from the home of Ruth Langmore and money laundering. Thanks to Netflix, that has put us on the map. So if you're still looking for summer vacation plans, come down to Lake of the Ozarks and visit the lakeside pub, Marty Bird's.
Very cool. Well, now that you brought it up, what'd you think of the finale?
Oh, man, I don't want to spoil it. Some people are still trying to catch up, but I thought it was well done. I thought I'll give it
an up or a down.
I liked it, yeah.
Well done. Okay. Very cool. So the reason for our chat today is we had a little bit of a back and forth on Twitter through DMs about a Twitter thread that was out there about CAS 2.0, and it started a little bit of a Twitter storm. Jeremy, you were involved with that. I was in Disney World, kind of checked out, so I got it kind of secondhand.
You seemed silent on that issue.
Yeah, maybe a little bit. So we should preface this though. Like both Gary and I, we're AICPA Leadership Academy grads, and we do not, we're not part of the AICPA haters group even a little bit. Sorry to speak for you, Gary, but I guess I will. So we don't come at it from that angle at all, but definitely the CAS 2.0 thing kind of gets everybody going a little bit. So Jeremy, like what was going on that thread? What do you think about CAS 2.0? Where are we? What does that even mean? 2.0? What did we just skip past 1.0?
Yeah. So a little bit of background. Ryan Lozanis, who, if you're in the CPA community, you probably heard of. If you haven't, look him up. He is a former accounting firm owner up in our neighbors to the north, Canada, and he sold that firm several years ago, and then ever since has been helping other accountants, I think in Canada and the U.S., help improve their practices and be better accountants and be more helpful to their clients. And so he posted a little while back that essentially saying that he thinks CAS 2.0 is some just terrible attempt to rebrand what we've really just been doing all along. That I think implicit in what he's saying is that there's nothing new here, right? We're still just doing the same work. We still have the same mission, right? Be helpful to our clients. And so what's all this 2.0 about? And Chris, to answer your question, I have no idea. I mean, part of why I started this podcast with you is because I don't even know what CAS 1.0 is. I'm still trying to figure that out. So much less what a 2.0 is. And, we joke, but, by the time this episode comes out, there'll probably be a 3.0 that we need to record another episode for. So I don't know. I think, part of the point of Ryan's thread there was to call attention to it and get us asking these questions, right? So what is the difference? Is this just branding, marketing, or does this thing have legs, right? Is there something that if you have already been doing CAS, you need to reframe your thinking and now shift into this 2.0, or you need to add another service, or you need to add another, component to your firm that isn't there already because of this 2.0 now. I don't know. But the thread was interesting. If you haven't seen it, go onto Twitter, look through Ryan's history. This would have been, mid-June when he posted this. So go look for that thread, read through it. Some interesting responses there. I don't know. What about you, Chris?
My thoughts on CAS 2.0? Well, I'll go here and I'll share my screen, which has a picture of a slide that I took when we were at Engage, which was early June, and it is very, very busy for sure. So CAS 1.0, basically what they're putting into that bucket is accounting, monthly close, financial metrics. It's kind of confusing as far as this CAS 1.0 / financial CAS / growth and evolve kind of. I'm not sure what that message is. So if you're looking at the video, you'll kind of see what I'm saying. Now CAS 2.0, what we're putting in there is dashboards and insights, financial metrics, dashboards and insights, financial and non-financial metrics, industry, niche specific, and then a continuous business cycle. So I'm not so sure what the distinction is there with all of the dashboards and analytics and insights and that sort of thing. But CAS 1.0 is going to be your bookkeeping / controllership. CAS 2.0, if I'm reading the slide correctly, is more of the CFO advisory type stuff. But I thought that CAS 1.0 was advisory myself, so I'm not really I'm not really sure what we're doing there. But that's just my take on it. So Gary, I'm interested. How are you guys doing with CAS 2.0? And maybe just back up and tell us how you're doing with CAS 1.0 and how you got started in the CAS, and because you've had a firm for a while, which if I'm not mistaken, you bought your firm, right? So um, kind of coming into it from that angle, from a legacy firm, and implementing some of these things. Like, how did that go, and what have been some of the pain points, some of the good things? Just spill the beans.
Again, can't thank you guys enough for having these meaningful conversations. It's important stuff, and it's good to get it out in a podcast format. I was similar to Chris. I just observed the conversation in my own way. Like, I didn't participate in the conversation, but I also think, what the AICPA is trying to do, as they, in my opinion, brand this for the profession. I do think, they kind of have an impossible task. Even if you follow the Twitter thread, there's no universal compromise on what this looks like, which is why you guys have unearthed this great podcast about what is this advisory service. And so I really connect the whole evolution of CAS similar to we all were at Engage recently, and Barry's State of the Profession keynote. He referenced, the conversation around movement of tax day. And I found that very interesting as it connects to the branding of CAS, because what he was communicating during his keynote is, as they get feedback from the association, from the members, there's really no bright line rule or universal compromise on what to do with tax day. And I think in context, that's similar to what's happening with CAS. I think, Chris, I've told you in person, like, what you guys are promoting about Be Helpful is so tremendously wise and good for the brand of CAS, because I do think you got to start small and you got to start simple in that. And I think, when people see an illustration like this, they start to get overwhelmed and they start to feel like a confusion and things like that. But I just feel like it's a little bit of an impossible task, just because as a community of people, we can't even really decide what it should be, what it is, and what it should be. So, man, I've been preparing all week for my answer to the acronym too, and I didn't even get a chance to answer the acronym question.
Well, that was the next question. That's what was coming.
Yeah, and Chris, for the record though, let me get the scorecard of what is. I know what Chris's is. Chris, could you tell me what you think it stands for?
So the way that we define CAS is with 2 A's: cloud accounting and advisory services. The reason why we do that is because the cloud accounting allows for the advisory service, for us to do it in a meaningful way. So to tie that back to this CAS 2.0 model, where we're doing dashboards and insights and that sort of thing, basically my opinion is that the only way to really do that and do it well is to have some sort of a cloud-based financial ecosystem so you can kind of connect all of these different data sources?
Yeah, I don't really care, to be honest. But yeah, I think it's what I originally learned, and I guess what I've run with is client accounting services. I think that gives it an easier interpretation for those who aren't familiar with or already doing it, right? Because they understand what doing work for a client is. They may not understand what cloud is yet, and we can work toward that. They understand what accounting is, or at least what they think accounting is, right? They may not understand what advisory means, and so we can build on that, right? And so I think for getting people in on the ground level of CAS, I think client accounting services might be easier to sell for those who haven't already bought into the practice yet.
And I love both those answers. And I think, like Wells is saying, they're both right. It doesn't matter. But I think, like, similar to you, Chris, what I believe CPA.com is trying to do with this illustration is really tell the evolution story of exactly the way you're defining the acronym. That cloud accounting component, which was really the baseline of how CAS got its roots and got its start, is what they're referring to as 1.0. As advisory services have grown and gained popularity, I think that's their attempt to, because of the confusion of the acronym. I mean, there's probably people at CPA.com that are sick of hearing about this acronym that has to be 3 letters and how they brand it. So I think that's their attempt here, is exactly the way you frame it, Chris, is 1.0. We're only doing that in order to overcome the confusion of the acronym, trying to delineate against accounting versus advisory, 1.0 versus 2.0.
So Gary, how'd you get started in CAS? How did that go? What was good? What was bad? What did it look like?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I got my start in the profession at a regional firm of 40 or so people. Great firm, great culture, taught me all the technical stuff really well. Learned from a lot of really smart people, treated me well, and I stayed for 8 years. I think that, a decade ago, when I first started finding out about CAS, when I would go to my old firm and talk about the topics of CAS, they were a very traditional tax and audit departmentalized firm and a very successful firm. So in those firms, and adopting a brand new service model was just really, really hard for them. And so as I was gaining excitement towards CAS, and I would go have my seat at the table to present it as change to my old firm, it never gained traction. And so ultimately, that was my exit from that firm, is I couldn't gain traction on CAS, because I saw it as, we've had these 2 traditional verticals in the profession of tax and audit, and I was really excited about this third one and being on the front end of it and the wild, wild west of it, and exactly what you guys are talking about on the podcast, doing it in so many different ways, being able to create that service line, that service model. And so, yeah, I had an opportunity in my hometown in Ozark to acquire a legacy firm, 30-year-old firm, one CPA sole practitioner with a small support staff. It was a very high volume tax factory. But I always knew as I was acquiring it that it wasn't going to stay that way. So that's ultimately, I acquired the firm, brought in a best friend and a business partner to help me along the way. That was my wife's contingency in the transition, was, I want you to do it. I think you'll be successful, but I want you to do it with a business partner, because she just knows how relational I am and how important that would be to me. And so over time, I mean, we've been at it 8 years. We have taken that high volume tax factory and converted it to where I was just running the numbers before the podcast, was 70% is in the CAS model, 30% in the tax model. So it's been, that's been the journey for us to take a tax firm, a high volume tax firm, very compressed into tax season, and stretch it into a year-round firm.
I wonder how many of these small and especially solo practices owe their beginnings to supportive spouses. I know mine certainly did. Um, so you mentioned that you got this start going down this CAS path because you were working at a regional firm that was pretty dead set in their traditional ways and just wasn't open to the idea. Like, how did you try to pitch CAS to that firm leadership? And looking back, what would you have changed maybe about that pitch? Because let's think about the accountants now who aren't firm owners yet, who are working for firms like the one you worked for that aren't open to the idea yet. What would based on how you tried to pitch it at your former firm, how would you recommend accountants working for firms now who know that this is the right move for their firms try to pitch it to their leaderships? And what kind of resistance should they expect? What kind of objection should they expect? And how would you recommend they try to overcome that resistance?
Yes, I mean, when I was pitching it, it was really under Chris's definition, under cloud accounting, under the CPA.com definition, certainly 1.0. But it was really just this tech-enabled, cloud-based environment of working with our clients. And so I think now, if you were in a firm like that now, I think there's great evidence where you could pitch it better. You could propose it better to your management team. I mean, there's great evidence about it being the number one service line growth in the profession. And to your partner group who has a vested interest in the bottom line profitability of the firm, like, I think there's enough evidence now that it could be packaged up in a better way. And honestly, like, getting back to the definition of CAS and what the acronym is, you can almost go with a definition that it's anything that's not tax or audit. I mean, kind of to your definition of be helpful. Like, if you're not doing tax and you're not doing audit, there's a good chance you're falling into the CAS space. And I think for larger firms, that's something Chris and I talked about on DM after the conversation on Twitter, caught fire, was another hard part for defining CAS is I think it looks really different for large firms compared to small firms. And all of us being in the small firm community, I think that's, again, that impossible task of branding it from the CPA.com level is these larger firms that have very successful tax departments, very successful audit firms, to bring in this third service line is possibly more challenging because, I mean, the responses that I got a lot was like, we just had our best year ever. Let's just stay the course in these two verticals of tax and audit.
So I think we skipped past a very important statistic that you gave us, was that your firm is now 70% CAS. And I can imagine a lot of the folks who are going to listen to this, that's where they want to be, and their head probably exploded when you went from 0 to 70%, right? I mean, in a relatively short period of time. So how did you do that? Is it just a matter of you're only growing the CAS portion of the business, or is it a matter of stop doing some of the tax and the audit work, or is it something else? Like, how did that work?
Yeah, in my opinion, the tax client is your best experiment into CAS. So you've already earned their trust. You've already have this relational aspect with the client, that trusted advisor role, whatever. Like, so I think, growing it organically is really how has been our primary focus. Like, we are not jumping out into SEO and branding it externally. In a high regard, we first started branding it internally, and then organically grew our tax clients. I mean, think about the messy cleanup job during tax season. That's a great candidate for CAS 1.0 or cloud accounting, as you define it, Chris. There's so many opportunities that we get exposed to during our tax workflows that can give you a step. You don't have to go like the illustration of 2.0 and the busyness of that. I think that intimidates people from taking that first step. It's like, oh, I've got to do all these things to call myself a CAS firm. And I think, that's what we're saying. That's what you guys have branded really well on the podcast about Be Helpful, is you don't have to do all those things to say that you're a CAS firm. Chris, I was going to ask you a follow-up about, your 4-letter acronym of CAS, or however you define it with the 2 A's. Like, do you feel one important topic that I think happens in the CAS evolution is, do you take the position that you can't provide advisory if you're not providing cloud accounting in that linear definition of cloud accounting and advisory services?
It's a really great question. On an ongoing basis, yes. So what I tell prospective clients when we have discovery calls is that we want to be packaging this whole thing together because we want to have control over the financial information. And by control, what I mean is the quality and the timing. Like, we cannot provide good, solid advisory services on information that we didn't prepare, where the quality of it is curious, maybe even at best. And we've had experience with that, which is why we migrated to, like, what we're going to package this whole thing together, and that's how we're going to do it. Now, if we're going to do project type advisory work, then yeah, maybe it's not as big of a deal. Maybe we'll do it, but we only take project type work very, very rarely, and only in cases where it really makes sense and it's something that we really, really want to work on.
And I assume that helps you scale because, again, you're productizing and you're packaging a certain service that you can execute to multiple clients.
Exactly. We decided a while ago that we don't want to be everything to everybody. We want to be niched. We want to be fairly standardized. It makes everybody's life easier, especially nowadays. Like, one of the things that I preach to my clients, one of the things that I preach internally is about employee friction. If we're talking about retaining talent that is just so hard to find, it's pay, it's flexibility, and it's friction. So how can we increase pay is pay, right? How can we increase flexibility, but then how also can we decrease friction? And friction can be a lot of things. It could be, I don't like this process. I don't like this app. I don't like working with this client, things like that. And one of the friction points that we have is when everything is all over the place. And that could mean a lot of things, but that could mean more than one GL, and that can mean different processes for different clients from a payroll perspective. So, like, we've standardized the whole thing, and that's the way that we operate. Now, does it limit our ability to bring in new work because we're looking for things that are so specific? Yeah, to an extent. It limits our potential client base in that way, but does it limit our ability to grow and to scale? I would argue no, it doesn't.
I mean, thanks for that response, Chris, because we have went on the journey of providing, in your definition, advisory without providing the cloud accounting. It certainly is harder to scale. It's maybe a higher realization point because the types of clients we're working with in that space really need the help, really need the expertise. So, the pricing is completely different in that, in my opinion. But what we run into from one of my passion projects in the profession is capacity planning. And when we've done the advisory work, what's really challenging about the advisory work without having the package that you're describing, Chris, is what we call the ad hoc pop-up project. Inherently, as you go on this journey with this client that is in a higher life cycle of their business, so they maybe have that internal accounting department, maybe they have that controllership or that CFO level, but they're really engaging with the CPA for different skill sets and different expertise. Inherently, what we've noticed happen is it totally disrupts our capacity planning. And because you have that deep relationship with the client and a need pops up, an advisory need pops up, like, there's an expectation there that, you can't put it off 90 days in our capacity plan. So I think that's something to be considered as you go deeper into CAS, I think there's an opportunity to provide advisory without doing cloud accounting. But what we've realized is it definitely disrupts our capacity planning.
Yeah, a few moments ago you said some of the effect of your if you're doing tax work or even audit work, you're probably already doing CAS, right? You're either as a result of those engagements or alongside it within your firm. And the way I got started in CAS in my firm was I started off as doing tax only. My engagements with my clients was just for tax preparation, tax representation, and then a little bit of tax advisory. And I quickly found out that doing the advisory, I mean, the most common question that small business owners have is how much am I going to owe in taxes, right? And even though I was supposed to be doing tax advisory for my clients, I couldn't answer that question until I prepared the tax return. And I was preparing the tax return based off books and payroll that the client was running themselves. And so how much can I really trust that? Right. And so I quickly realized, following along with that model, that it just wasn't sustainable. At least it didn't seem sustainable to me to be trying to run a tax preparation, tax advisory firm without also doing the actual accounting work, right, or what we would call CAS. And so this is part of why the actual meaning of the acronym, matters less to me, because it really was on that, and not even so much to be helpful, right? It is I saw it as a need within my own firm, right? And the struggle of trying to prepare a tax return based off client prepared books and client run payroll, and come back and see that the client had an S corp with showing a loss, but then they've got plenty of payroll that they run themselves through their payroll service, or just some kind of crazy situation like that, where had I had access to financials throughout the year, we could have prevented some of these problems. And had I had access to financials throughout the year, preparing the tax return would have been so much easier. So it was almost more of just a self-preservation kind of move, right? That, I was going to be able to better serve my clients, and therefore justify the work that I was doing for them and the fees I was charging them. By doing that extra work. I started off just trying to upsell it, right? Let me also take over your book. Of course, there's a lot of resistance to that, right? I'm already paying you for all this other stuff. I don't want to pay you for more stuff, and I can do it myself, right? It's easy. And then pretty soon I realized I just needed to package it all together from the very beginning, right? So yeah, I think if you're a small firm owner and you're not already positioning some sort of service or package of services to your clients as CAS, or probably don't call it CAS to the clients, right? But call it whatever you want and whatever terms resonate with your clients. If you're doing tax work for them, then just consider it a self-preservation move, right? Like, tax season is hard enough, especially the last couple of years, if you're not already doing the accounting work. At least that was my experience with it. That's how I got into CAS. And so what you said there about you're probably already doing it if you're selling bookkeeping cleanups during tax season, right? Then start doing CAS work, start offering it, right? If you're looking through payroll that your clients are running for themselves, especially for your S corporation owners, and you're sitting there looking at an S corp owner's W-2 saying, why did you run this much payroll to yourself? Or why didn't you run more payroll to yourself? Take over the payroll for that client. And stop thinking of it as like, I have to build this other wing of my firm that's going to offer these CAS services, and start thinking about it as just doing what you're already doing, just in an enhanced way that makes life easier for you and the client.
Yeah, and on the topic of complementing the tax or the audit services, I can recall when asked the question, what is advisory? This was probably a decade ago, or within the last 5 years, 5 to 10 years. Jim Bork with Witham, who serves on a lot of AICPA conference committees, etc. He gave one of my favorite answers in it, and he also told a story with the answer. But it's again similar commonality to the be helpful response. And he's the managing director of Witham's advisory services practice. but I think it was a digital CPA panel. He was asked, what does it mean to be advisory? And he said, asking your clients what you're not doing for them that they wish you could. And it was really powerful to me at that time. And it goes in the vein of being helpful, like you guys are promoting. But the story he told, as the complement to tax and audit, was he was going to a client to deliver an audit where his team had blown the, and I'm paraphrasing here, so if I get this wrong, Jim, I'm sorry, but like something along the lines of, he was delivering this audit, they were over budget, there was some scope creep in the audit, and he was forced to go to the client and he was going to have to ask for some sneak billing, for example. Like he was going to have to ask for some scope creep realization on the audit, and he didn't know how the conversation was going to go with the client, and he had some anxiety about that. When he showed up on site to deliver the audit, I believe he talked about the scope creep and the money that would be involved with the scope creep. And before the client even responded about that, they said, yeah, that's fine. But if whatever the dollar amount was, they were like, if you could help me solve this, I think it was a cybersecurity issue or even something as simple as a password management issue, they were like, I'd pay you twice that. And so it was like, wow, here was all this anxiety about blowing the budget on an audit, anxiety about delivering that. And literally the client came to him and said, it ain't about the money. Like, if you could solve this problem for me, I'd pay you twice that.
I love that story. So that story doesn't mention anything about CAS. It mentions about advisory. And we're over here talking about CAS 1.0, CAS 2.0, being helpful. Here's my question, philosophical question. When we put together our website, when we put together our marketing materials, when we're talking to the world on social media or maybe on other podcasts or whatever, when we're talking to our clients or potential clients, are we talking about CAS or are we talking about something else? Are we going to put CAS on the website? And if we do, are clients even going to know what that means? Or is CAS just something that we talk about internally, so to speak, in the accounting profession, and then we talk about it in some other way to clients and prospective clients?
I just listened to an episode of Geraldine Carter's podcast, and Geraldine Carter she runs a coaching practice for CPA firm owners, and in that, she's in this last episode that I listened to, she specifically said the word accounting should not show up on your website at all, because nobody is looking for accounting. Nobody wants to buy accounting. Nobody wants to buy tax return preparation. Nobody wants to buy bookkeeping. Nobody wants to buy payroll service. They want to buy the result that all of those services help facilitate, right? Now that result, there's going to be some common language there. They want to save on taxes. They want to run better businesses. They want to increase profits or revenue or something like that, right? But all of those other things that we see as so pivotal and the things that we're trying to sell, clients don't want any of that, right? Like they're not using those terms. They're not sitting there at night thinking. They might sit there at night, in April and say, I got to do my tax return, right? But they're not sitting there throughout the year saying, I need to be planning for my taxes, right? I need to be thinking about preparing my tax return. I need to be getting my bookkeeping in order. They're not using any of those terms, right? So sorry to jump in on you, Chris, there, but yeah, Gary, I want to hear what you think on that too. But yeah, I think, while we're talking about terms and terminology and what does CAS mean and all of this, it's incredibly important, again, whether it's client or cloud, right? But the focus here being on the client and being helpful, we've got to think about these things in the terms that they're using, not the terms that we want them to use, so that we know what service to sell them.
Just a big, huge ditto on that. I mean, that's probably my favorite conversation around the CAS topic is, don't worry about the acronym. Don't worry about what it stands for. All that matters is if your clients, your prospects, your leads, if they recognize it as something they desire and something they need when you're branding it for your firm, that's really all that matters. And when we've been on this CAS journey, it's really, CAS, acronym terminology, coming out of CPA.com and coming out of the AICPA, I actually think that what CPA.com is trying to do there is help brand it for firms that are not looking at it the way the three of us are looking at it. They're not marketing it. And so CPA.com is trying to help them because they see the potential in the profession for this service line. And they're really trying to package up and brand it for the firms that are having a hard time adopting it. For the three of us, we can go out and talk about it. We can brand it and be successful in that. I think about it also similar to, and maybe this could be a future podcast topic, but the launch of QuickBooks Live or QBO Live, whatever they called it. I remember whenever that launched a few years ago, I have quite a few contacts into it. And there was a lot of chatter about, what is this? Is this an attack on the accounting community? And so I had a call with a lot of my contacts into it to like settle me down and like figure out like, were we friends and now we're competitors? What's going on here? And what they told me was really meaningful. They said, Gary, you're doing everything the right way. You're a firm of the future. You're building a firm of the future. Not everybody's doing it that way. And if you think about Intuit, QuickBooks as a product, they had these firm owners that resisted the cloud, right? Like they were still having problems convincing firm owners about the cloud. And they said, this is not competition for you. You're already doing all these things. We are launching this product because, again, paraphrasing, like we're trying to bring the marketplace along because there's a certain segment of firm owners that just aren't doing that. And so, again, commonality to what CPA.com is doing with CAS is like, I think that's what they're trying to do is help those people that are resisting it or having a hard time packaging it. And to that slide with the busyness that you referred to, Chris, that's the attempt of saying like, these are all the different types of things you can do in this service line.
So, gentlemen, we are just about out of time. Gary, thanks so much for being a guest on the podcast today. What are the key takeaways or the key things that our listeners should take away? CAS 1.0 versus CAS 2.0, just offering CAS in general, marketing CAS. What are the key takeaways there?
Yeah. So from a branding standpoint, brand it however you want. Like if branding is a strength and a skill set and an interest of yours in your firm ownership, don't lose traction by tripping over this CAS language and terminology and what the acronym stands for. Brand it whatever makes sense to you. All that matters is if the lead prospect or client, if you're organically growing it, that it connects with them and it's meaningful to them. So brand it your own way. Or if you struggle with that, you can follow. There's a roadmap there with the CAS evolution of CAS 1.0 and CAS 2.0, and you can use that as a branding tool. A second point that I would want to reinforce is grow it organically first. The cost of converting an existing client compared to the cost of onboarding a new client, we learned that lesson time and time again. We were always more successful organically growing, going deeper with existing relationships versus onboarding new relationships.
I think that summarizes it perfectly. Well done, sir. Jeremy, you want to wrap us up?
I am Jeremy Wells, CPA. This is my co-host, Chris Hervochon. Gary, can't thank you enough for coming on the show. Gary Wood, CPA. Where can people find you on the internet, Gary?
So on Twitter at Gary Wood, CPA, on the World Wide Web at crcfirm.com, or email gary@crcfirm.com.
Fantastic. Thanks again, Gary. Thanks, Chris. Thanks you all for listening or watching, depending on what medium you're on. Be sure to like, subscribe, comment. Let us know how we're doing. Let us know if there are other topics or even guests that you'd like to see or hear on the show. And be sure to follow us at CPA Advisory Show on Twitter. And you can find the show at cpaadvisoryshow.com. Thanks for listening and have a good one.